Alright guys, today we are going to show you what we've been up to on the 2008 Trailblazer build that we've been working on the past couple months on the channel. If you aren't familiar with this build, we are attempting to build the ultimate sleeper. I want this thing to go 10.00 in the quarter mile, and I want it to have all the creature comforts. I'm talking heated seats, cruise control, leather interior, it's even got a sunroof. And I want to keep all of that functional while making this thing into a bit of a hot rod. Now, in the last video, we had just gotten the engine dropped into the car, and today we are going to get the rest of the engine bay buttoned up and get this thing running. So let's get started underneath the engine bay and show you what we did there. So let's start off underneath of the hood. Now, quite a bit has changed underneath of the hood, so let's start off with the wiring. Now, I made this wiring harness almost completely from scratch. I was able to basically take the pigtail harness that comes with the Max ECU and basically just crimp ends on all of the plugs. There was a few of the original plugs, such as this one, which I reused. I actually have this set up so that it is being partially controlled by the Max ECU and partially controlled by the factory ECU, which is still present in the engine bay. As you guys may or may not know, the 2008 and later Trailblazers came with an E67 ECU. Now, these ECUs are very tunable, but I wanted to run the 8 HP transmission, so it made sense for me to do a Max ECU piggyback. So basically how this is set up is the factory E67 ECU controls the throttle, and that's about it. It is used to read a couple data points off of the engine, such as the coolant temperature, and the oil pressure switch is still hooked up, and it controls the alternator. But other than that, that is the only thing that it reads or controls. And the reason that I did that is I wanted it to still show valid data on my original dash. From there, the Max ECU controls everything else. Now, the reason I did this is because I really don't like stock ECUs. They're kind of a pain in the butt to tune, and a lot of times you have to trick it into doing what you want it to do, rather than just telling it what you want it to do. So the Max ECU is also controlling the variable valve timing, which is another point of pain with the stock ECU. A lot of times you have to kind of put that thing into a happy state, and if you start mucking around with the variable valve timing position, it can put the ECU into a state where, like, you might have good fueling in one area and bad fueling in another area. It's very much a compromise. These ECUs don't actually have a real fuel map. They are based on a coefficient style system, and it's not really easy to make wild changes to that coefficient system from the factory values. You know, typically when you want to convert to a boosted style fuel map with an E67, you would see pretty wild changes to the coefficients, and for whatever reason, the 4200 operating system does not like that. So it's very much a compromise. Instead of being able to get the fueling dialed in all locations, you have to kind of live with a little bit of weirdness. Also, underneath of the hood, you'll see that we got our intake. This is a set of billet runners that I had made. This is my most recent design. I've made quite a few tweaks to this billet runner set. You've seen us use this billet runner set on the Camaro and on my Fairmont station wagon, and this is Rev number 3. This has a slightly longer runner in order to get it around the cylinder head, and it also has a built-in area. If you guys don't know, there's actually a crankcase vent that comes out on the intake port that we always vent. It actually vents part of the bottom end and helps the cylinder head to drain oil back to the oil pan, and we definitely like to vent that particular crankcase vent. We also run the crankcase vent off of the valve cover. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this came out. It got a little tight back here around the brake booster. I had to make a little bit of a notch, but this is actually a MazWorks intake plenum, and I designed my intake runners to sort of weld into that system. And I'm very happy with how it came out. For the throttle body, we're just using a factory 2008 Trailblazer, the one that was on it, throttle body, and then it is going to our charge pipe down there. Very, very short charge pipe down into our intercooler. And then on the other side, we get to see some more goodies that we have fabricated for the Trailblazer. Now, a very important part of building a turbocharged vehicle is starting off with the coldest air possible. As you increase the pressure of the air with the turbocharger, it is naturally going to heat up the air, and the colder air that you can feed it with, the less temperature that you will see on the outlet of the turbo, and the easier the life of the intercooler is. On my Fairmont station wagon, we got lazy and built a air intake that just grabbed air right from inside the engine bay for the first rev of the turbo system. We were seeing 175 degrees coming into the turbo, and I was not a fan of that. So we reworked the system and got a true cold air intake, and we lost right around 80 degrees coming into the turbo, and we got it to start sucking in fresh air. We saw significant gains to the performance of the vehicle just with that mod alone, and so I wanted to take that seriously. I bored a hole down in the fender well, and we actually have our air intake. It is grabbing right off of this vent right here in the bumper, and you can see our air intake right behind there. I'm trying to make this as efficient of a combo as possible, so that is what we did. I had to add quite a bit of a notch to get around our AC fittings right there. I wish they made one with the fitting that came off the side this way, because then we wouldn't have had to do that, but it is what it is. Also, I fabricated this coolant overflow tank right here, and I had to sort of get creative with it just because we had kind of an odd location. I couldn't use like a universal overflow tank. I'm very happy with how that came out as well. And I think that about wraps it up for the engine bay. I'm really happy with how it turned out under here. So next, let's move on to underneath the car and show you guys what we did there. All right, guys, now that we are underneath the car, I have a couple things to show you. One is we had to go with a remote style oil filter. So as you can see, some doofus put a steering rack in the way of where the oil filter originally mounts. So we had to go with a remote style oil filter. So the thread on the oil filter is the same thread as what you would see on some of the LS engines. I believe it's the early LS engines, and I'll put the part number for the exact setup that I used on the wiki. But basically we have that oil filter adapter, which goes back to a remote mount oil filter that you can see here. Now the oil comes in through this line into the filter and then comes out through this line here. But this gave us the opportunity to use the remote mount oil filter housing to be our oil feed mod location. So we took filtered oil and we are feeding it up into the side of the block right up here. And we are using a fitting to go into the block from our friends at Atlas Industries. Big thanks to them once again. And that basically accomplishes the oil feed mod. Then we get our turbo feed from the rearmost main galley plug. You can kind of see it up in here. That goes up to feed our turbo, and that pretty much solved our oiling situation. Alright guys, we are getting close to wrapping up this build, and we have a bit of a problem. My speedometer doesn't work, and I want my cruise control. So we need to figure out why it's not working and figure out a way to fix it. Now the plans for how to make it work was I was going to pull the vehicle speed off of the CAN bus from the 8 HP, and then I was going to use an output from my Max ECU, which is in the car, to send a signal to my T42 transmission controller, which is no longer controlling anything, and I wanted to send it to the vehicle speed input on that TCU right there. And I was hoping that the factory car got the vehicle speed from that T42, and my speedometer would work. But playing with it on my laptop and trying to trigger that thing to come on, it wasn't working. So we need to figure out what I'm doing wrong. Now the problem is, this Trailblazer has like 10 speed sensors on it. It has speed sensors on all 4 wheels, and it also has a speed sensor at the output of the transmission. It has one on like the front drive shaft. It has one on the output of the transfer case, and it might even have one at the input of the transfer case. So this thing has speed sensors on speed sensors on speed sensors, and I don't know which one the dash uses in order to display speed. So we need to figure out which one it is. So in order to do that, we're going to use one of these. This is a signal generator. If you guys don't know, I'm actually an electrical engineer, so I have quite a bit of familiarity with this stuff. So what we're going to do with this guy is we are going to go to each one of those speed sensors throughout the vehicle, and we're just going to apply a signal to it. And I'm going to have my mom sit in the driver's seat, and she's going to tell me if the speedometer moves, and that will tell us which speed sensor the car is using to tell the vehicle speed. And then we will take those 2 wires that were coming off of the Max ECU, and we will send them to wherever that speed sensor is and apply a signal to those wires, and hopefully we will get our cruise control and we will have a working speedometer in the vehicle, because I want all my creature comforts. So basically what this digital signal generator does is it generates a signal, obviously. You can set it to multiple wave types, sinusoids, sawtooth, square waves, all kinds of stuff. We are going to set it to square wave because I am using a digital output from the Max ECU, so it's either on or it is off. And then we can also play with the frequency here, and that's basically how fast it's counting. That would simulate, how many teeth are going by at a particular, amount of time. So we will get this all set up, and we will probe around the vehicle until we find that speed sensor. All right, so I have my 2 wires, the 2 wires that I thought it was. I have my signal generator hooked up to it, and when we turn the speed up on the signal generator, so I'm going to put like 120 hertz to it. I'll hand the camera up to my mom.
Sure.
It's recording.
It's recording.
Hey, is the speedometer moving?
The speedometer moved to 5 miles per hour. Now it's moving higher. Now we're going faster. 10 miles per hour. Woo! We're really going fast.
Alright, you really want to go fast now?
Sure. Of course I do. Oh my goodness. 25 miles per hour. 30, 35, 40, 45. We got to 48 miles per hour. Oh, 60. 70. I don't think I can handle this. 90. 100. Almost. No. Yeah. 105. 105. It goes to 120. Okay, we're almost there. 120.
Okay. Alright, let's slow this puppy down.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting scared. Woo! Okay, yeah. 0.
Did we win the race?
We won.
Yay!
We won. We won.
Okay. Sounds good, Mom.
Hello. How are you? See ya.
Alright, I can let you down now.
Oh, we're coming down.
Turn the ignition off.
Okay. And I'm stopping the video.
It's alive! Now, a lot of what is involved with building hot rods like this one is a lot of problem solving. And our first start, we had a few problems. First off, my dad noticed that the 1 and 2 cylinders were not firing, and after some poking around, we found that the wire that comes from the max ECU that tells the coil to charge and discharge was not getting a very good crimp connection. I tugged on the wire just a tiny bit and it came completely loose from the crimp. And what I found out is that the crimp connectors that I was using were not the right ones for the wire gauge that I was using. I tried to just replace that one pin on the plug, but I found out that there's actually quite a few manufacturers for the plugs for the Volkswagen Audi coils, and it turned out that I had 2 different style ones, and I ended up having to replace all of the ignition coil plugs on the car, and this solved the problem. The other issue that we ran into was going into a high idle state, and what we found this to be was it was going into limp mode essentially. I was trying to use one of my TPS signals coming from the throttle body to trigger my fuel pump to go from low speed to high speed, and the stock ECU did not like that. It must have been causing a little bit of offset in the voltage, and yeah, the stock ECU doesn't like to see any variance there. So we fixed both of those, and it was time to do a little bit of a rev check. Can I say silly things? Okay. Ouch. Makes noise. Makes cool noises. Boop, 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 boop. First day, first fire up. Whoop, 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 whoop. You can tell it's still got oil inside the pipe because it blows a little bit of smoke, but it sounds good. Sounds sports car-ish. Yeah. Speak a few syllables.
Superish.
No.
That's kind of what I was going for.
I knew that was his favorite car. So.
All right, guys, now that we had the car running, we just had to figure out how to get this thing into gear. And that turned into a bit of a fiasco. Now, I will say it is entirely my fault. I kind of ignored some of the stuff that was in the instructions. At Max ECU, I ordered the wrong part number shifter. It didn't work. Big surprise. Then I ordered the right part number. It showed up and it looked like it had been underwater. and then I returned that one, and then I got a third one, and that's what's in the car. It turned out fantastic, but before that, I actually figured out how to trick the car into going into gear. I was able to basically set it up as a shifter emulation style setup, and I was able to basically fake it out and say, hey, my drive switch is active, even though there is no drive switch. So because we now had a car that could move, you know, maybe it was time to do a little burnout, you know, for posterity. Does not want to light off.
The turbo.
Yeah, none of it. It's like, it's so lazy. It's like it's hitting a safety or something, but... started to light them off. That was 4,500 RPM. Yeah, it's just, something's not happy. Now, that didn't really go the way that I was hoping it would. As I have discussed in previous videos, these transmissions have the ability to have essentially a factory trans brake. They can activate a couple different gears in the transmission, which will cause it to not move, and you can stall the engine up against the torque converter. And what I found is that as soon as I let off of the trans brake, the thing kind of just fell on its face. Something was holding it back, so I, of course, tried a bit more RPM on the two-step, tried to, you know, hit it a little harder, see if I could get the tires to light. And that didn't really work either, so I gave it more. And we basically ended up with, I couldn't figure out why the heck this thing wouldn't light the tires off. Now, there were a few other things that we discovered from this little driveway test. This thing sat entirely too low. We kept scraping the front frame section on the driveway. And that needed some addressing. It's actually already been addressed. And we also had the issue of the thing falling flat on its face. That being said, in order to see what we figured out with both of those issues, you're gonna have to stay tuned for the next video. So with that, I'm gonna end this video off here. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Okay, I gotta finish filming before it rains.
Take two.
Okay, get out of the shot. Come on. Okay. You're a goober. Okay.